A hand presses into wet clay. 40,000 years ago. A cave with no name. The fingers are thick. The knuckles are heavy. The palm is wider than yours. Someone blows red paint across it, and the wall keeps a print of a hand that will never touch anything again. Not a tool. Not a child. Not the cold stone of that cave. The species that made this print is gone. Not hurt. Not weakened. Gone, the way a language dies when its last speaker stops speaking. We call them Neanderthals. That name came later, given by people who never met them. And here's what almost nobody knows. For most of human history, we were not alone. More than one human species walked this earth at the same time, under the same eclipses, hunting the same animals. Then, almost all of them disappeared. Only one kind of human survived to ask what happened to the rest. Ours. For 100 years, scientists have circled the same uncomfortable question. Did we do this? Picture evolution as a ladder. Ape at the bottom. Modern human at the top. A clean climb toward being smarter, like nature had a plan. That's not what the fossils show. For at least 300,000 years, several different human species were alive on this planet. Not one line leading to us. Many, all at once. Homo sapiens, that's us. Neanderthals, hunting across Ice Age Europe. Homo erectus, still surviving in the river valleys of Indonesia, long after everyone thought they were extinct. Then it gets stranger. On the island of Flores, scientists found bones from a human species barely 3 feet tall. So small that some researchers didn't even believe, at first, that the bones came from an adult. The world nicknamed them hobbits. And somehow, they made stone tools their tiny hands should barely have been able to hold. That wasn't even the strangest discovery. In a cave in Siberia, scientists found a single fingertip bone. Just that. They pulled DNA from it, and the DNA matched nothing else on record. An entire species, discovered not from a skull, not from a skeleton, from one fingertip. We call them the Denisovans. No full skeleton has ever been found. A tooth, a bone, a fingertip. That's the whole file. So this was never a story about one species standing alone. It was a crowded family. Several human species sharing the same rivers, the same herds, the same fires, for hundreds of thousands of years. Then, in about 30,000 years, a short stretch of time, by evolution's clock, almost all of them vanished. Only one walked out. Here's the explanation people reach for first, because it's the one that makes us feel powerful. Modern humans show up. Modern humans wipe everyone else out. One violent takeover between the smarter species and the doomed one. Simple. Satisfying. Except look for the proof, and it isn't there. There's no mass grave of Neanderthal war dead. No weapon found stuck in a Neanderthal skull. What scientists find instead is stranger, and harder to explain. Cave after cave, layer after layer of dirt and ash, Neanderthal tools simply stop showing up. And modern human tools start appearing in their place. No battle. No blood. Just silence, spreading across an entire continent. But silence doesn't prove a killer. It only proves an ending. To go further, you have to throw out the old idea of who Neanderthals actually were. For over 100 years, the story was simple. They were a failed early version of us. Slow. Simple-minded. Doomed by their own limits. That story is dead. The evidence killed it. Neanderthals buried their dead, and at some sites, they arranged the bodies with what looks a lot like ritual. Flowers. Red paint. Real care. They made jewelry out of eagle claws, cut and polished on purpose, long before modern humans ever reached Europe. Then, in 2018, one discovery destroyed what was left of the old theory. Scientists dated cave paintings in Spain. Shapes. Handprints. Red lines drawn across the rock. The paintings were at least 64,000 years old. Modern humans hadn't reached that part of Europe yet. The only species that could have painted that wall was Neanderthal. Symbols. Ritual. Maybe even something we'd recognize, if we saw it up close, as grief. Which means we were never looking at the death of some lesser species. We were looking at the death of another kind of us. So if it wasn't violence, what was it? Look at the timeline again, and a quieter answer shows up. Quieter, and somehow more disturbing than any war. The weather. Ice ages during this period came and went faster than scientists can fully explain, even with today's climate models. And there were never many Neanderthals to begin with. Scientists estimate their entire population, at its biggest, was only in the tens of thousands. Not tens of thousands in one area. Tens of thousands total. Spread across an entire continent. A group that small doesn't need an enemy to disappear. It just needs bad luck, repeated. Small populations lose their genetic variety fast, meaning fewer differences between individuals, which makes it harder for the group to fight off disease or survive tough conditions. They can't handle a run of brutal years in a row. One harsh winter, repeated across a few generations, can wipe out a species that no army ever could. And into that already struggling population, modern humans arrive. Not as invaders, more like a slow wave of people moving out of Africa, competing for the same shrinking herds of mammoths and reindeer, the same caves, the same firewood. Two groups. One growing, one already fading. You don't need a massacre for a species to disappear. You just need one group outlasting the other for long enough. That should have been the final answer. It wasn't. In 2010, scientists mapped out the Neanderthal genome, basically, their complete genetic blueprint. And what they found didn't just add to the story. It broke it wide open. Modern humans outside of Africa carry, on average, 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. Not some leftover, useless scrap. Active DNA. Working DNA. Genes tied to how your immune system fights illness. To skin color. To how your body handles fat in cold weather. Genes linked to sleep and to how you feel pain, still switched on, still shaping real people alive today. Somewhere, in the regions where modern humans and Neanderthals lived side by side, the two groups didn't just compete for food. They had children together. Nothing was completely wiped out. It was absorbed. The species name ended. The DNA didn't. There's a real chance a piece of them is inside you right now, in the exact cells you're using to read this sentence. And Neanderthals weren't the only ones who left something behind. The Denisovans left an even stranger gift. People living in the Himalayan mountains today carry a Denisovan gene that helps their bodies use oxygen efficiently at extreme heights. A survival tool, passed down from a species we've still never found a complete skeleton of. Right now, people are breathing easier high in the mountains because of a species that went extinct tens of thousands of years ago. Which means extinct might be the wrong word entirely. These species didn't disappear the way a species disappears when an asteroid wipes everything out in a single afternoon. They dissolved. They mixed into the population that replaced them, until the line between us and them became a matter of which piece of DNA you're looking at. Which brings the real question back, sharper than before. We asked who killed the other human species. But what does it mean that we're the only ones left to answer that? There's no Neanderthal historian writing down what happened when a strange, restless species moved into their valleys 40,000 years ago. No Denisovan thinker wondering what happened to their relatives in Siberia. The only species left standing is also the only one left to tell the story. And every version of that story is being told by the side that survived. Sit with that for a second. It means we may never know for sure whether this was violence, or replacement, or slow mixing together, or something in between that we don't even have the right words for yet. We're piecing together what happened using only the testimony of the one species still in the room. And underneath all of it is something even colder. For almost the entire history of human evolution, millions of years, being human never meant being alone. Different human species lived side by side. Split apart. Competed. Sometimes mixed together. Over and over, across many different eras. The world we live in now, just one human species, alone on the whole planet, is not the normal state for our kind. It's the exception. It's only lasted about 30,000 years. A tiny sliver of time. Barely a blip in the multi-million-year story of what human has ever meant. We are not evolution's finish line. We are the last surviving branch of a family tree that used to have far more branches than this. And branches that get too thin, in biology, always end up doing one of two things. They recover, or they disappear. Somewhere in a museum drawer, a Neanderthal skull sits under bright lights. Labeled, numbered, studied by the species that replaced it. It can't tell us if it knew what was happening. Whether the last small groups, fading out across the frozen valleys of Spain 40,000 years ago, understood they were the final members of their kind. Whether there was one Neanderthal, someone whose name we'll never know, whose face has only been rebuilt by scientists using bone and guesswork, who was, in fact, the very last one. We know how the story ends. We may never know what it felt like from the inside. Here's what we do know. Another kind of human once stood exactly where you're standing now. Thinking. Grieving. Marking cave walls with the same red paint people still use in art today. Their species ended. Ours continued. And the difference between those two outcomes might come down to nothing more than numbers, weather, and time. The line between the species that survived and the species that didn't is thinner, and far more accidental than we like to admit. We are not the ones who won. We are simply the ones who are still here to tell the story.